All right, so let's talk a little bit about communicating with our customers. We talked last time about vehicles that you might use to contact either your database or um, new prospects that you're trying to acquire. So let's talk a little bit about the whole concept of building a dialogue with your best customers. All right, so we want to distinguish between building a dialogue and communicating with your customers, because communicating with your customers is just a one-way communication strategy where I provide my customers with information, etc., but I never really work on building a dialogue with those customers. And so we're going to talk a little bit about building dialogue. By the way, the definition of a dialogue is a conversation between two or more people. And of course, one of the things that database marketers need to do as they build social bonds with their customers is to think about building a dialogue with those customers. So how much dialogue do you need to enhance lifetime value? And then again, how much dialogue do you need to build strong relationships? And is there a difference between those two? Or is it more an issue of the quality of the communications and the value of the communications rather than the number of those communications or the amount of that dialogue? So how much dialogue do your customers really want? Well, the first mistake people make is assuming that your customers really even want a relationship. I'm always reminded of this when I was talking one time to a good colleague and friend of mine by the name of Don Schultz, who recently passed away, about the idea of relationships. And he used to say to me, Jack, not everybody wants a relationship with your company. And he was right. You know, an example that I like to use is the example of Nevada Power. And I think I may have used this in one of our previous lectures. Nevada Power wants to build a relationship with me. So does the Southern Nevada Water District. They want to build a relationship with me. They send me newsletters, and they are very proactive in their wanting me to build a relationship with them. Here's the problem. I don't want a relationship with them. The reason I don't want a relationship with them, there's nothing in it for me. There's no value in me having a relationship with Nevada Power. I'm not going to get better power. I'm not going to get higher quality power. I'm not going to get cheaper power. I'm not going to get anything for building a relationship with them. The same thing happens with the water district. So I don't want a relationship with them. I want my relationship with them. I want my financial interactions with them to simply be that, interactions. So the second mistake is thinking that your customers even care about you. You know, you want your customers to like you and to write positive things on social media about you and to refer their friends to you, etc., etc. But it turns out that in many cases your customers don't care. They don't consider your business something that they want to refer to others. And so when we think about building a dialogue with these customers, it's also going to be a challenge because these customers have better things to do with their time than build relationships with you. And then the third mistake, of course, is thinking that sending your customers more communications is a good thing. Yeah, I worked with the people at Las Vegas events, and the Las Vegas events people love email blasting, and they just think that email blasting is the greatest thing ever. I tell them that there are some real negative things associated with email blasting. They tell me, no, not really, and they just go ahead and do all the email blasts that they can. But they're not the only people doing that. There are lots and lots of businesses doing that, and I'm going to show you an example of that later on in this lecture. All right. One of the things I always talk about when we do consulting work with companies is the mistake of trying to convince your customers that you care when it turns out that you don't. Because eventually they will figure that out. And by that what I mean is that if you make this big production about how much you care about your customers and everything else, and then when push comes to shove and they really need you to to help them and you don't, well, then they start to figure out that it's really all yak and no action. All right, so the other thing to think about here in terms of building dialogue and communicating with your customers, and that is social bonding isn't just social bonding, it's a business activity. Learning about your customers and establishing relationships with your customers is a business activity. And every small business owner, or I shouldn't say every, but certainly most small business owners know that. They know that the best thing that they can do is build strong relationships with their customers. I'm always reminded of one of my favorite businesses. It's a rock company, and the guy who owned the company's name was Dave, and so I always refer to him as Dave the Rock Guy. And Dave understood that it was important to build relationships with customers, to get referrals, and to get, in some cases, some repeat business. All right. And so when you think about social bonding, it isn't just striking up a conversation with your customers and chit-chatting with them. It's also should be considered a business activity and worth it if, in fact, it will lead to higher lifetime values, stronger relationships, and more profits over time. And, of course, that goes right back to us understanding the distinction between communicating with our customers and actually building a dialogue with them. Now, so we have this notion of what are the prerequisites for building dialogues with customers. I'm not sure that these are prerequisites, but to be able to build dialogues with your customers, here's what we need to do. First, parties at both ends have to be clearly identified, and I mean clearly identified. So it's not our friends at 2246 such and such address. It is what? It is Mike and Joe, Lisa and Mary. It is parties at both ends that are clearly identified and clearly have names. All parties must be able to participate. You don't build dialogue by telling your customer stuff. You build a dialogue by conversing with customers. That is, providing them with information and then listening to their response back to you. That's why most dialogue building is done face-to-face, where I say something to you and you respond and say something back to me. And over time, we build a relationship because of that back and forth, that dialogue, rather than you simply telling me, go stand over there. All parties must want to participate. Remember, that goes back to my lack of willingness to participate in relationship building activities with certain businesses. I have to be motivated to participate. And the motivation to participate, usually at the front end, is mostly financial, and it has to do with financial bonding activities. But it could be something else. Dialogue can be controlled by anyone in the exchange. So if if I'm in a hurry, I can say, I can't talk to you right now. I need to be doing something else. And at the other end, they need to be able to do the same thing back to me. So the dialogue needs to be able to be controlled by either person in terms of timing, in terms of amount of dialogue, and in terms of where the dialogue leads us. Dialogue will change the enterprise actions to the customer, and the dialogue should change the customer's activities with the enterprise. That is, if we're communicating back and forth and building a dialogue, the results of that dialogue ought to be trackable. And last and most importantly, the dialogue needs to be something we refer to as a smart conversation. That is, it should pick up where it left off. I know that when I go to my barber shop and you know how it is with the barber shop, maybe you go in every 6 weeks and have your hair cut. I've been going there long enough, for probably, 25 years or 20 years or whatever, that we can start the conversation exactly where it left off. That is, we know enough about each other, we have enough background information about each other that we can start the conversation sort of where it left off the last time. That is, it's a smart conversation. That is, it evolves over time, and it isn't, oh, nice to meet you, so-and-so, so it's not this notion that every single time we meet, we start at the beginning. When you're talking about building dialogues with customers, think about multiple touch points. That is, places where customer and the organization and the people in the organization um, communicate with each other, and think about IMC, that is an integrated marketing communications campaign. Some of the keys: build your communication model as a two-way vehicle. Get information from your customers, record it, remember it, and use it. Personalization of the communication is a minimum. And in fact, customization is also needed in today's market. Let's see if we can think through this one more time. Personalization means I talk to you by name. Hey, Mickey. Hey, Susan. So the personalization is that this is a personal communication. It is meant for you, and the reason I know it was meant for me is because they say in the introduction, "Hey, Jack." Customization means that the communication is designed for you specifically. That is that the message is not the same. Everybody doesn't get the same message, and different people, maybe a bunch of people might get the same message, but not everyone gets the same message. And I customize the message basically based on what I know about you in terms of purchase behavior, in terms of perhaps background demographics, etc., etc. Think about the corner grocery store issue. In the corner grocery store problem, we talked about the corner grocery store building social bonds with their customers. Well, the way that that's done then is that allows the corner grocery store owner to customize the communications that they have with you. Instead of saying, "Hey, welcome to my store. If there's anything I can do, let me help you," it is more along the lines of, "Hey, Jack, we got in your favorite brand of pickles in, so you might want to grab a jar of those while you got the chance." Show that you care, but of course only do this if in fact you care. Become friends with your customers. Get close to them. Find out what they want, what motivates them, and what's important to them. And I have a little note here calling the Sam Walton model. Many of you know the story about Sam Walton. Sam and his dog, and I want to say his dog name was Old Rusty or something, Old somebody. He would drive around in his old pickup truck from Walmart to Walmart. And he would walk in unannounced, and he would chit-chat with the customers. And he found out what customers wanted and what was important with customers by simply walking in and becoming friends with them. They didn't know who he was, and he did, and then at the end of the day, he met them perhaps for the first time. And at the end of the day, though, he learned enough about them by becoming friends with them. Every contact should be a learning experience. Every time you speak to a customer, you ought to learn something about your business and how maybe people view your business and what you need to do to create a better experience for your customers. Find out the most cost-effective way to create a meaningful communications. And of course, my response to that is, really? Well, that's not really the case. The way that you ought to communicate with your customers is the way that they prefer to be communicated with or communicated to. For instance, many undergraduate students, many Generation Z's people would rather have a text message conversation than a face-to-face conversation. And right now we have a little project going on with a company called Pods, and Pods, before they will sign a deal with you, want to talk to you. They want you to call them and have a conversation with one of their sales reps. And of course they want to cross-sell you and upsell you and all that sort of thing. The problem is Gen Zs don't like that. That's not the way Gen Zs like to operate. So you know what you ought to do? You ought to create a communication method for Gen Zs that is the one that they prefer, not the one that you prefer or the one that you think fits your business model the best. All right. So when we think about providing information for people, I always tell people, think about this maybe from an advertising perspective. What kinds of things do I want to communicate to my customers? And of course, from an advertising perspective, it's the purpose of the goal of any particular communication or advertisement. I might want the communication to build awareness. I might want to educate you. I might want to inform you. I might want to remind you. I might want to persuade you. I might want to have a communication that helps me build my position in your mind, or I might want to communicate with you in an attempt to establish my image, which of course is part of your position. What do you want to communicate? Well, there's all kinds of things that you might use as a communication vehicle for your customers. There are offers, sales, flash sales, special sales, limited sales, individual sales, all those sorts of things. Coupons and rebates, webinar invites, or in fact on-site offers to come down to the store and check out the brand new models. You also might want to queue something that would be considered valuable information. If you want to know what valuable information is, ask your customers what kind of information is valuable to them. It might be newsletters or reminders of a sale ending, or even the items that are in your cart that maybe you never did check out. New product launches, order confirmations, etc., etc. But you might want to communicate valuable information. What else? Well, there's birthday cards, common interests. For instance, there's a social cause going on this week. And I know that it's a social cause that you might be interested in. Asking for referrals, surveys, frequency programs, and all the other sorts of things. Well, you notice when I say surveys here, I always say be careful, because if you ask people what they want in a survey and then you don't deliver it, all you did was irritate your customers. By the way, you might want to ask yourself, which of these activities are really building dialogue and which ones are simply one-way communications? Some of the vehicles that you might use: 800 numbers, surface mail, inbound and outbound call centers, email, face-to-face interactions, social media, co-op communications, etc., 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 as the potential vehicles. We talked about that some last time. And of course, some of the communication options might be coupons, rebates, orders with surveys, registration cards, frequency programs, which we're going to spend some time talking about in a future lecture, 800 numbers, surface mail, inbound and outbound call centers, email, etc., etc., etc. Communicating on the internet, of course, think about ways that we use the internet as a communication vehicle. It can be, of course, your website is one of those things. Your presence on social media platforms, a Facebook presence, a YouTube presence, a Snapchat presence, etc., etc., etc. Understand that I am not the world's biggest supporter of companies getting overly involved on social media platforms, but in some cases a presence is needed, and in some cases it might really help drive relationships and potential new customers. Obviously, the one that we talked about the most is email communication. Why do we do emails? It's inexpensive and it's fast. It could be merchant websites, like having a store on Amazon or having a store on eBay, or having your products on the Walmart merchant website. The thing about the internet is not everything is great about the internet, right? The internet is organized as an unalphabetized phone book. It is in general passive, with the exception of email, of course, but it's also less personal, and it sometimes creates bad decisions and options like email blasts. Your website, why do you want to drive people to your website? Well, it's cheaper if you deal with them through your website. It's faster. Your website is open 24 hours. When I go to your website, I'm never put on hold. You can make your website interactive by using chat bots, even if you have to leave a message. It is easily tracked, and it puts customers in control of the information search and when and how they want to search for information on your website. Extranets, of course, we're all familiar with extranets. These are password protected aspects of an internet. So I can go to my bank's website, and of course, if I want to find out all that private information that I might need to know, like bank balances and things, that's done through an extranet. The benefit of extranets is it creates a private, one-on-one sort of discussion location. It's secure. You can use two-factor verification, etc. It's inexpensive. It is more personal. It is more interactive. And of course, in some cases, maybe even addictive. Social media presence. Why would you go up online and spend that money creating a social media presence? Well, once again, it's relatively inexpensive to communicate with customers that way. It's fast. It's open 24 hours. It's customer driven. It's designed, social media is designed to put the customer in charge and let customers talk to each other about your products. Now, we like them to be talking positively about your products. Of course, it also creates a format where they can talk negatively about your products. Sometimes that's not quite as good. It's interactively designed to create an inclusive conversation. It's easily tracked, and once again, it puts the customer in control. In theory, they become your advocates and salespeople. Of course, they also become your detractors and sworn enemies. Fielding responses. Well, when we field responses, we have to be concerned about the service system. That is, when people come in with a call in or even use a chat bot and have a question or a complaint, how do we handle it? We need to be able to record those responses using some sort of a coding system, and we need to be able to follow up. When people call in and complain, you need to follow up. So in conclusion, the communication must add value to create a relationship. And for people to participate in building a dialogue with each other, they have to be motivated to do so. That is, at the end of the conversation, they have to believe that having a relationship with you and having built that dialogue with you is somehow creating value in terms of their overall relationship with you. The biggest mistake that marketers make is over-communicating with emails. And that happens a lot with email blasts, and our next lecture, we're going to talk about email blasts and its impact on subscriptions and unsubscribers.